Welcome to Be On It, episode 7.
Jessica, what's going on in the Beehive today?
Hey, Debbie. I was just thinking about Generation X versus other generations and assumptions we make about each other. I was thinking about Generation X. We're considered the MTV generation, and that's anybody that was born from 1965 to 1980, according to wokewaves.com.
Hmm.
Isn't that
Okay.
interesting? I know. So it's
Yeah.
kind of a broad range. And
Yeah.
you and I being Generation X, I just know that we're known for being tough and spirited, and we're pretty adaptable to constant change. When you think back about all the things that happened during our generation, especially the 80s, all the technology change, we went from records to 8 tracks to cassettes to Walkmans to CDs to so much change. And then we went from big computers to smaller computers as time went on. So we've had so much change. And then pop culture became such a huge hit and music videos. So we came from a time of major change and change where the family dynamics changed as well. So we're considered the latchkey generation where, you might not have two parents at home or you might have two parents working. And so they weren't there when you got home from school. Just very different times.
Wasn't the internet created during our generation as we were growing up?
I would have to look that up. I want to say it might even be earlier. It might be the boomer generation where they started to like figure it out, especially with like NASA and things, but I
Hmm.
I didn't
Like for
research.
consumer use, though. The
Oh my
AOL
gosh,
modem,
yeah.
the really slow one that made the weird noise.
Oh yeah, dial up when we had
Yeah,
home phones.
exactly. Dial up. Yeah, because we were using our landlines and that took a while, but then you can get on and get into a AOL chat room and talk to somebody who lived in a different part of the country.
Do you remember when you had to call for movie times and like what was playing because it wasn't listed?
No, you know what? I don't even remember how I did find out about the movie showtimes. Was it in the newspaper?
It was in the newspaper as well.
Yeah. And we watch TV versus streaming. So
Oh yeah.
the schedule of what was on TV, I feel like it was in a magazine or in the newspaper.
It was in TV Guide
TV
or the
guide. Okay.
newspaper. Uh-huh. Each
Okay.
week you'd get if
Yeah.
you bought the TV Guide, you would get what was listed. Or if you watched your regular shows, you knew they came on at a certain time every week. So there was that. And then you knew that, Saturday cartoons started at a certain time. Those were the days.
And you remember we used to have the landlines with the long cord. Obviously, you would have your little phone, and for me, the cord would always get tangled up, you know?
Oh, forever, always getting tangled. You could only go so far. There weren't cordless until much later, cordless phones until later. You were kind of
And
stuck.
I don't know about you, but I used to love talking on the phone, and I was forbidden to talk on the phone. And
Oh,
although, we had call waiting too, I used to love to talk on that phone.
I didn't talk on the phone as much because I would go see my friends and talk with them in person. I
Hmm.
do remember if you wanted to make a long distance phone call, it was cheapest to do it at a certain time at night. So you never did
Oh,
it early
wow.
in the day because you wanted
Yeah.
it to be cheaper.
Hmm.
So I do remember that. And I still remember writing letters and
Oh,
thank you
yeah.
cards and things like that.
Yeah, I had a pen pal back in the day when
Oh,
I
my
was
cousin had a pen pal.
in elementary school. That was really fun
Oh yeah,
to
just
write.
times were so different and so much has changed. I don't even think that it's expected to necessarily get a thank you card. You just say thank you and that's usually good enough. It's so
Hmm.
interesting. We're a generation that stuck with one job. We were pretty loyal to our company. We didn't job hop. We were too afraid to speak up about what we wanted because we thought we'd get fired. There's just so many different things
Layers.
that
Hmm.
it was a time where you could get a job at a diner or fast food or the movie theater, where now it's a little bit more competitive because a lot more people need to work that are older generation. It's like they can't retire as early as they used to be able to retire. It's interesting. The cost of things were so much different back then. You could get more for your money. It went a longer ways. It's just, yeah, completely different.
I feel like we were mostly in peacetime.
For the most part now, that we our parents had gone through
Like
war, the Vietnam War, the Korean War.
Korean War.
I mean, we did have some wars, but I didn't feel like we were affected like they were by it. And politics in my house, I don't know about your house, we didn't talk about politics at our house. I
Mhm.
remember Ronald Reagan being president, and I remember them making fun that he had jelly beans. I knew he was an actor. As a kid in the 80s, I was pretty young. I didn't really know anything above and beyond that. I remember the Challenger. Unfortunately, people lost their lives. Us being at school watching that live, crazy.
I don't remember that event. I grew up in Texas, so NASA was big down there, but I don't remember the Challenger event. But
Okay.
yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of people do, but I don't remember it.
Yeah, I just remember like it being so shocking. Them like turning off the TV really quick and not really talking about it.
I remember the candy that I used to eat in elementary school.
Oh,
Some of that candy is still around, but I remember this candy called an Astro Pop, and it was
oh,
a cone-shaped candy, and it had like this really sticky, sugary material that was stickier than a lollipop, and then it had a little wax base. And I loved the Astro Pop.
I remember Bazooka gum because you can get the
Oh,
comics and you could order the little sea monkeys, is what they called them
oh,
back then.
okay, yeah,
And
I
so I
remember
just
that
remember
gum.
being excited about that. I remember the lollipops, the little candies that were like 10 cents for a tiny box, like Boston
Mm-hmm.
baked beans and jelly beans. And oh my gosh, we had some good candy back then. Chico sticks.
And they're still around too.
They're still around. You can still
Yeah,
find
many
them.
of them are.
Just crazy. I remember the Halloween costumes being plasticky, not like the rubber better quality that we have now, but they were like the ones that, could cut you if you
Oh,
if you
really? Oh, so really stiff plastic?
really stiff
See, I didn't
plastic
go
things.
trick-or-treating. I think as a kid, I went like maybe once or twice when my brother took us when we were quite a bit older.
In grade school after my parents divorced, I'd go trick or treating. I'd either be at my grandma's house and my grandparents would take me trick or treating, or I'd be with a friend and we'd go through our neighborhoods. And oh my gosh, just having the best time. Or the school would have like a carnival and you would just go to the school and get various things there.
Oh, yeah, I
Just good
remember the
times when the
carnivals.
schools just
Yeah.
had more like things going on.
Well, I grew up in Texas, so it might have been a little different than here, but I remember in my at my old middle school on Fridays after lunch we could have a bag of popcorn for 25 cents or you could get a pickle.
Oh, interesting.
I love both popcorn and pickles, so I think I like alternated, but I really loved pickles.
I don't
You don't,
remember.
the PTA did it at my school.
Do remember my children, we did popcorn for them. Like if they're class one for the month, we would do a whole popcorn for the class. But I don't remember having popcorn as a kid at my grade school. Yeah, I think they still sell those big pickles.
Mm, I still love pickles to this day, so.
I do too. When we talk about our generation, what do you think are some assumptions that people make about our generation?
Our generation?
Uh-huh.
Well, I think that our generation are older. Many of them may have families if they chose to. So I feel like the younger generations, like Gen Z, feel like we're old fashioned. Maybe they think that we are not willing to change and we're kind of stuck in our ways.
Oh, they definitely think that. I agree with you.
Operate differently than they
Well,
do.
right, exactly. I also think that they think that we take no BS too,
Okay.
because we're
Which is true.
fiercely independent.
Yeah, we're true. That's true.
I think it's pretty true. I think,
Yeah.
we tolerate to a certain extent, but I also think that other generations might look at us and think we're slackers,
Okay.
um,
That could be like,
especially our parents' generation.
mm-hmm, the boomers.
Just because we didn't follow always in their footsteps, we like some people didn't get married right away. They chose their careers, they didn't have kids right away. We were a generation that moved women forward, coming off of our parents' generation where women couldn't even get our own credit card. So we're coming off of where women became more independent and they didn't always get married right away. Traditional families might have gotten married right after high school. They may or may not have gone to college. You might have worked a trade. It just depended.
Yeah.
Our generation didn't always necessarily go to college because you could usually find a good paying job and then work your way up in a company too. Unlike millennials, Gen Z, and Alpha, where they, almost have to go to college in order to make any sort of money.
hmm I mean, I think that so much happened as we were growing up with technology, with the workforce and industry that is different than now. As far as us being stuck in our ways and not changing, I don't think that that is in fact true because we had so many changes during the time that we grew up. For instance, technology, for one thing. I mean, we have been able to adapt to change. We have the perspective of knowing what life is without technology or with a minimal amount of technology. So we
Well,
can see both sides of.
I agree with you. The freedom that we had, because we didn't have our parents calling us every few seconds asking us where we were. We had the freedom of come back before dark, or hey, I was going over to friend so and so's, and they knew that they could call over there if they needed us to come home. But there was this freedom where we just kind of became pretty independent and we didn't tell our parents what we were doing. This
Wild,
unhinged,
right?
wild freedom. Yeah, it was great. And I think
Wild and rogue.
and I think that really comes from our parents' generation, which are the boomers, that they were all
hmm
born from 1946 to 1964. They were more, you know, for change. They were fighting for rights for people. They were, they brought rock music and folk music and
hmm
influenced the country's attitudes towards drugs and sexual freedoms like no other generation. We're talking about Woodstock and like the misconceptions of, oh my gosh, their parents' generation that would call them hippies, and then if you wore your hair too long. I just remember there being this fight within them about they want to move forward, and they were resistant towards the traditional ways, and things were changing. It's very interesting. It went from your mom stayed home to boomers where they started to see this change where the mom might get a job, even if it's part-time. So she wasn't always at home. If you had a day off, it would look a little different. You might be watched by a neighbor. It's very interesting how they started to change over time and break some of those traditions. They weren't as conservative as their parents prior. They hung on to some traditions that their parents had, trying to be independent but still hanging on to that tradition. And I think there's assumptions about them, that they don't care about the environment, or that they are all impatient and angry and judgmental, that they don't, respect work-life balance. And I just think that's far from the.
I feel like the boomer generation did experience the hardships of war, whether they were in combat or whether they were still back in the States or they were in a war-torn country. They know what hardship is more than the Gen X folks. They were brought up to be conforming.
Right.
They were kind of restrained in many ways. They kind of had to grow up quick depending on their situation.
When I look back at my parents, my grandma, she was married, and I don't know when she got divorced with my grandpa and remarried. That dynamic started to change, that you saw a little bit more
Oh,
divorce. I just know my grandma had 5 kids, and my grandfather was working basically 6 days a week and golfing the other day. So he wasn't at home a lot, and
hmm
he left her to raise these kids who were wild, and she just couldn't do it all on her own. I think that led through their adult life where some grew up and became responsible and others just kind of stayed childlike.
you can see how when they get older and then they start parenting a new generation of children, how
Right.
that influences their parenting and whether they know what they're, if, I feel like some parents, oh, they get wisdom here or there, and with maturity, it does affect how they parent in a good or bad way.
My parents were young when they had me and my sister. They were like
Mine too.
22 when they got married, and they were very immature. Like they were more about themselves, and that never really changed, unfortunately, for them.
Hmm.
And so the way they'd parent were based off of traditional ways. My dad, he was religious off and on. He was authoritative. My mom, she wasn't like the traditional housewife at all.
Yeah.
She wanted to be taken care of. My dad went to work and he had his own business at times. She wasn't very good about keeping a house clean, so he'd have to do everything around the house, and she wanted material things, and she just wanted to go have fun. She didn't really want to raise kids.
Mm.
So, very different from my upbringing than some of my friends who had parents that were still married and were very traditional. My dad was back and forth. He was an alcoholic, then he would be going to church and be good for a little bit. Then he was the disciplinarian. He would fight with my mom. The circle of abuse that continued with them until they divorced, unfortunately.
And I see, and I that it kind of makes sense unless they have some sort of revelatory experience where they change things. But, when immature people are having children, puts more stress on them. They're still trying to mature. It's not a great recipe for success.
No, and they just never healed any of those traumas, and they got older,
Right.
but they still stuck to their ways. As my dad got older, he became a little bit different. My mom became different. Unfortunately, not different in a good way. And my dad became religious. It was too late. They both were no place to be parents. They were not very great at it. They did the best they could, I guess, with what they had, but they weren't, in my opinion, they could have been better.
Yeah. My mom had kids early and she did the best she could, but at heart she was still a young person. I see a lot of like things that she would have wanted to do before she had children. Then once she became a parent, she just had to put that aside and do raise her kids and support her family.
Yeah, she had to be responsible. Even our parents' generation, where you graduate, you get a job, you get married, you have kids. That kind of followed over to Generation X as well. Depending on your household, you might have had more freedom to go to college, or you might have had freedom to be single for a while and not have kids right away. You had a little bit more freedom than you did if you were a parent's generation, because a woman, if she got divorced, how was she going to get a loan for her own home? You had to have your husband's permission. A lot of women stayed married
Yeah.
until they could divorce.
Then you think about us Gen Xers. We were being raised by these parents, right? Who didn't really know enough to really be responsive to our development.
Right.
They were worried about putting food on the table, but not really in tune with how their children's development and their psyche, basically,
No,
is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
we weren't really allowed to talk about our feelings. That wasn't a thing.
There wasn't an open door policy about talking
No, it
about
was
our
more
feelings,
threats.
right?
If you're crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about, kind of mentality.
Or this is the way we do it, my way or the highway type
Right.
of
No
parenting
listening to your
style.
feelings pretty quick because you didn't want to get more in trouble. Yeah, very interesting. Whereas I think millennials, they're born between 1980 and 1994, and they have a higher percentage of college degrees than previous generations. I think that Gen X were then raising some millennial children. Times had changed where you had to go to college, where you couldn't just necessarily get a job right out of college. Even a trade took 4 years if you were going to be doing a trade. So you still
Hmm.
took a while. Very interesting generation. 1 in 8 millennials, according to neurolaunch.com, say that their parents after college, millennials are delaying marriage and babies and taking time to find themselves, and they're just waiting to get married, and then some had to move back home because the cost of college was so high. That
Hmm.
just tells you the shift in inflation and the country in general, whereas we could get a job and still get an apartment. and be just fine. Whereas millennials, it was too expensive. Even with a college degree, they were making basic money that couldn't even get them an apartment unless they had
Hmm.
roommates. It's very interesting the shift that you see them getting tired of not getting work life balance. And there's this assumption they are entitled and that they want to be constantly praised. When you look at the big picture, Gen X, we didn't dare ask a boss what we wanted because we didn't want to get fired. We didn't rock the boat. Whereas they're not afraid to rock the boat. If you're not meeting my needs, I'm going to go find somewhere that's going to meet my needs and pay
Hmm.
me what I deserve. Kudos to them because obviously our generation, we didn't talk about our feelings as much and we raised our kids to talk about their feelings and we really listened to them. We were there for them. So therefore we developed these kids that had this confidence to, ask for what they need.
That does make sense.
We gave them what we didn't have in all the best ways. You want to talk about your feelings? Let's talk about it. We didn't have this corporal punishment with our kids. You're not going to
Hmm.
get spanked for talking about your feelings. You're not going to get spanked because you did something that we didn't agree with. We're going to talk about it and, let's work on not doing that again. So we had a different approach.
I could be a millennial if I was born a few years later. I'm just thinking millennials as a big group. And I think that maybe they weren't restricted to a script or weren't programmed to go on this one path. They kind of went on their own path. It is kind of what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I think that they had that freedom because, I think that, they also came from either a one parent household because of our generation where things changed and people were divorcing, that was becoming more common, and they might have a step parent. For millennials, it was a new family dynamic, and that you would talk about things, and that, you know, there was more social media. They were becoming more technical. We've always been kind of technical with our advancements. It just wasn't as advertised and available like it. It was expensive. I couldn't afford a computer back in my time. The computers were like 10 grand back in the day. Whereas as things progress, they become more, affordable. So they just had more access to things because of people going to college. The income was different. So for me, my kids are Gen Z,
Hmm. Two of mine
and
are as well.
yeah, those are kids that are born between 1997 and 2012.
Hmm.
So on average, the Gen Zers were given their first cell phone at age 10. Isn't that crazy? Per
Yep.
wokewaves.com. That's
Hmm.
that's the average. And for me, my kids were mad because I wouldn't let them have a cell phone until they were in 8th grade. First of all, I just didn't think they needed it, and it was becoming more common for kids to have, but it
Hmm.
wasn't necessary. We still had a landline, and my husband and I had cell phones so they could call us if they were at a friend's house. They always had a computer because my husband being in tech, they always played educational video games and they would play regular Minecraft and things that were popular and still popular to this day that my kids, had. And then, parenting differently. The older Gen Z, which are my kids that are, 21 and going to be 23, they remember when you had to go to
Oh,
Blockbuster to get a movie or the Red Box to get video games and
yep.
movies. Whereas the younger generation, they have streaming. Like you just order it online, or like you might still have to go to the store to get certain video games. Yeah, everything's become more streamed.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to think
I
about
mean,
that change.
yeah, because I mean, we're thinking about the boomers, we're thinking about Gen X, and now we're looking at Gen Z. I mean, it's just a group of people that are born at a certain period of time. They experienced all the circumstances that occurred during that time, be it tech, be it economy, be it war, social change. I'm just kind of thinking about these groups of people. They're not all going to fit the same mold, but generally speaking, when big events occur and things evolve over time, it will have shaped them as people, especially as they were developing, from children to teenagers, teenagers to adults. I'm also thinking about, like, I'm a Gen X and then my children are Gen Z. I'm also thinking about how do I relate to them? Our standards are different and my expectations are different than theirs.
As parents, we see our kids' potential. For me, I never put an expectation on the kids. I take that back. I did
Yeah.
want them to get good grades, and the reason why I had that expectation is because they could always ask for help if they were struggling. So
Hmm.
there was no reason why they couldn't get a good grade. I didn't care if they got a C and they worked really hard at it. I just didn't see that there should ever be a D or an F. When all you do is try and ask for help, and we'll get you the help that you need if we're not able to help you, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to keep up on your grades. It's a non negotiable. Other than that, I let my kids try the things they wanted to try. Here was another non negotiable. If you were going to try something, you would have to try it for the whole amount of time that it lasted, if it was like softball or whatever it was. You couldn't just say, nope, one day you didn't like it and then be out. That was a no go for us. You try it and then you never have to do it again.
I can't say that I had really tight expectations on their grades or anything. I had this attitude, for me at least, was for my children was, be all you can be. You have so much potential, work your strengths, that type of thing. And they did fine in school. My thing as far as standards and expectations was don't be lazy. That's big for me. I just feel like everybody needs to be contributing to the
Oh, yeah.
family goal of whether it be cleaning house. Everybody needs to be a contributing member, and I just have a low tolerance for laziness if I see it.
Yeah, luckily my kids were pretty good. As they got older, they were super involved with different activities. So it was like pulling teeth to get them to help out. They would, and they started to do their own laundry and things like that. But as far as household chores, no, that predominantly fell onto me, and I tried my best. They actually told me, thank you for not putting that pressure on us because it allowed us to get our homework done and not feel like we had one more stress.
Mm,
Thank you for not saying, oh my gosh, you can't go do this. So it had to be a little bit more open for them. It couldn't be as strict with them because it just didn't work as a family with them. And they would help vacuum and they would help sweep if we were going to be going to do something. I have to get this stuff done, guys. I need your help. And they would. It wasn't strict at the house.
hmm.
And they're
Yeah.
happy that it wasn't. They were like, that is the one thing I'm so grateful that you didn't enforce because it allowed us to mentally decompress from our days. And that just told me, as a generation, they were feeling a lot of pressure from school and just society. My kids as teenagers, they went through COVID. And that
Yeah.
was like my son's sophomore year and my daughter's junior year. I knew not to press too much. I knew that it was affecting kids. And I knew that with COVID, I couldn't enforce them not hanging out with certain friends. So they were allowed to hang out with certain friends that we saw on a regular basis. And they wore masks and they did things that they had to do. I knew that I couldn't like say, no, you can't hang out with anybody because it wouldn't work. For their mental health, I had to just agree, and I talked to the other families and we just had that pact. I mean, that's just how it was. And as things loosened up, it became better for the kids, but it was rough during
Yeah.
that time. And I just
Yeah, it
watched their
was.
mental health be affected. And I think that goes into things that we're still going to see with this current generation, the alpha generation. They're the first to be in the 21st century and then to go through this pandemic as young kids, not
Hmm.
even seeing relatives for the first year of their life. I think we're going to be seeing these long-term effects greater span of time. You wonder, okay, are they're full on technology, right? Whereas Generation X, they Z rather, might get
Hmm.
online and use social media to make face-to-face plans. That's what my
Yeah.
kids would do. I'm like, don't you want to go hang out with your friends? Well, it used to crack me up because they were like, yeah, I gotta jump online real quick. We're gonna play a video game and I'm gonna go meet my friend. That's how they used social media, which wasn't as popular as it is with the alpha generation. The alpha generation is born between 2010 and 2025. That's a short time ago. It's still the alpha generation. They're the first generation are going to be affected just strictly with COVID-19. I'm sure you've seen with your son how he was affected and they have a harder time making friends. This is what the the neurolaunch.com was saying that they were having a harder time making friendships because every friendship was online, and it kind of had to be during COVID because everything was forced to be online, and so they weren't making those face-to-face connections like the prior generations. Very interesting.
Well, I mean, and even after COVID, and I don't even know this even would have been prior to COVID, there's less and less children just playing outside,
Right.
compared to when we were kids.
Right. I think they've become so attached to their phones. I
Hmm.
think that's a problem for teachers too. I know that I have a couple teacher friends. They're like, it's like pulling teeth to get the kids to put their phones away. And even in school, it's like this double-edged sword because they're given Chromebooks. They're giving like fun interactive math games. Even my kids, when they were in school, were given online homework to do. So technology's there, but it's like, how do you balance it where you're not getting too much? Parents, they want their kids to go outside because that's healthy, like, have some downtime. But I also think that as parents, some parents are guilty of over planning their kid, over
Yeah.
committing their kids to different things. And
Hmm.
kids just sometimes need some playtime. And it was a balance for me. I was like, okay, you want to do all these things, but you also need some downtime. I'm like, can you handle, my son wanted to do violin, and then he wanted voice lessons, and he wanted to do his theater group. And I'm like, okay, if you feel like you can handle that, let's do it. But I also want you to have some downtime. And so I didn't want him to take on too much more than that because that kept him very busy. And whereas my daughter was an athlete, that kept her busy. And she, hung out with her friends. So she had that one thing that kept her busy because their team would travel, whereas he had multiple things. You could easily get them overcommitted because they want to try all these things. You have to limit them because I feel like
Hmm.
it's overstimulating them. It's not fostering them going outside, doing face to face things with friends, or just breathing some fresh air, going for walks. I think that they're not as active today as they once were because there's just different expectations.
I think across the board, Gen X, I mean even boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z and Alpha, we're all very much impacted by the use of technology.
For sure.
I mean, every adult has a cell phone, and every adult spends a considerable time on their phone for work, for pleasure, for general interests, for everything. Tech element has been very impactful to all generations across the board. And I think we're all going to realize what our tech can do for us and definitely what it can't do for us.
Oh, I agree. And now we're moving
'Cause-
into AI. So that's going to be a whole new evolution of technology. It's a fine balance because I find myself numbing out by watching a TikTok or Instagram. It's my junk food. I don't even really watch TV as
Yeah.
much as I enjoy looking at cute animals or listening to somebody's story. I think there's universal connection. It doesn't foster real relationships. Those aren't my friends. Luckily, I have a great friend group where I can go hang out too. When you think about kids, the Gen Alpha and then coming after them, their friends might be the social media people that they're watching. Those might be their friends that they interact with and make comments about because they're not fostering face-to-face friendships. It's very interesting to see where we are and where we're going and where we've been.
I'm thinking that there's something that tech can never replace, and that's another human being's presence.
Human connection's everything.
In my mind, that can never be replaced by technology. And my lesson learned from thinking back to when I was growing up to now, and I have many more lessons to learn, is that no matter what generation we find ourselves in, that our human connection, our human presence to one another can't be replaced and is so important.
I agree. Because, I mean, how do you continue to learn as a human being if you don't have those connections? Because if you're learning from AI, that's pre-programmed people that have like been asked questions. It's not constantly evolving
Yeah.
unless you're constantly asking another human what their point of view is. Like, they're not a brain. They're not a functioning brain. They're a technical brain. They're not a real human with emotions and feelings.
Right. And they're not as responsive as a human being, too. So for my son and our relationship, I have to be present. I have to be there, sitting near him with my full being and all my emotions, because AI can't replace me, because not only am I a being with emotions, but I have a motivation to care about him and to see him do his best. So all that plays into it, and I just that's the lesson learned about um, looking at all these different generations, is that we need each other and we need our presence and we need to be there for each other.
I agree with you. If you guys like what we're all about, join us next time on Beyond It, episode 8, where we talk about progress versus progression. Thank you.
See you next time.
We are all about community. Join our community by following and subscribing to Be On It through YouTube, Instagram, and of course your podcasting platform, so we can continue to bring Be On It to you. Just so you know, this is for entertainment purposes only. We are speaking from our lived experiences and are not licensed therapists.